You may well already know the story. The parable, originally from India, is best told, I think, in this version by the black gay writer James Baldwin. There were once 6 blind men who stood by the roadside every day and begged from the people who passed. They had often heard of elephants, but no one had ever seen one, for being blind, how could they? It so happened one morning that an elephant was driven down the road where they stood. When they were told that the great beast was before them, they asked the driver to let him stop so they might see him. Of course, they could not see him with their eyes, but they thought that by touching him, they could learn just what kind of animal he was. The first one happened to put his hand on the elephant's side. "Well, well," he said, "now I know all about this beast. He is exactly like a wall." The second felt only of the elephant's tusk. "My brother," he said, "you are mistaken. He is not at all like a wall. He is round and smooth and sharp. He is more like a spear than anything else." The third happened to take hold of the elephant's trunk. "Both of you are wrong," he said. "Anybody who knows anything can tell this elephant is like a snake." The fourth reached out his arms and grasped one of the elephant's great legs. "It is very plain to me that he is round and tall like a tree." The fifth man, very tall himself, chanced to take hold of the elephant's ear. "One ought to know that this beast is not like any of the things that you all name," he said. "He is exactly like a huge fan." The sixth took some time before he could find the elephant at all. At last he seized the animal's tail. "Oh, foolish fellows," he cried, "this elephant is not like a wall or a spear or a snake or a tree, neither is he like a fan. But anyone with a particle of sense can tell that he is exactly like a rope." Then the elephant moved on, and the 6 men sat by the roadside all day long and quarreled. Each believed that he knew just how the animal looked, and each called the others hard names because they did not agree with him. Baldwin ends his parable by observing that people who are able to see sometimes act just as foolishly. As the month of May has approached with our worship and journey group's theme of truths and lies, I found myself returning again and again to the wisdom of Molly Ivins, the great American newspaper columnist who had a particular knack for decoding the mysteries of Texas politics with her withering wit. In 1995, I heard her give a speech, a part of which has stayed with me across all these years. I recently found a video of that speech online and was intrigued by the fact that I somehow remembered almost verbatim what she had said when asked a question from the audience about the role of reporters in the political process. Her response was about telling the truth. And she explained that there was a deep value in the formative stage of most reporters' careers when their job is to show up on the scene of a car accident and interview the 5 bystanders who witnessed what happened before then trying to write an accurate story. She said that such experiences day in and day out gives you a greater sense of the complexity of truth. A greater sense of the complexity of truth. Not unlike what those men grasped after in trying to understand their elephant. Not unlike what any of us encounters in our efforts to understand our world. What Ivins describes is, I think, nothing less than a spiritual practice, especially for this era in which we live, when so much of the culture we swim in bombards us with simplified snippets of truths, boiled down to bullet points and sound bites, rather than the actual complexity, the actual reality of a given situation. There is a market for this, of course. I mean, Who doesn't want their truth delivered up straightforward and simple, reduced to its essence, easy to digest, no mess, no fuss? It must be said, of course, that fortunately there is no shortage of tremendous writers doing great reporting about the complexity of the world that we live in. But as our attention spans seem to grow shorter, and our media silos with their intricate algorithms reinforce our already existing points of view, we are, as a culture, it seems, losing this vital capacity to hold complexity, to appreciate the layers of nuance, the shades of meaning, the different views that fill out a fuller and more accurate picture. The ability to recognize that the snake or rope or fan or tree we think we know may not in fact be the whole of the story, or may not be the real story at all. The ability to appreciate that the snake or rope or fan or tree that our neighbor describes may well be a vital piece of the puzzle, even if not entirely accurate. Taken as a spiritual practice, this notion of engaging with different witnesses, if you will, to listening to the various voices that may each hold part of the truth, is a path that will often lead one to a place of humility, because it brings us up against our limitations. We can't know everything after all. The quest for truth ends up showing us that we would do well to have some modesty in our ambitions. What such a practice offers to us, a practice I might call having a holy curiosity, is a deepening of our capacity to hold complexity, to know that there can be many facets to a single truth, to appreciate that many things can be true at once, and that these truths can be in conflict or even in contradiction with one another. In a word, to discover that the truth can be messy. The older I get and the longer I serve as a minister seems only to confirm this. That has certainly been true across this past week, as Unitarians across the country have tried to make sense of last week's spontaneous decision at the annual general meeting of our delegates to adopt an eighth principle, which would affirm our commitment to the dismantling of racism and other oppressions. Immediately, and in the days that followed, some were absolutely elated by the bold action taken, feeling we were living into our principle of truly honoring the worth and dignity of every person. Some were confused, questioning how the decision came about so rapidly, given that it didn't seem to accord with our principle of respecting the democratic process. Some at the meeting, and many who weren't, were frustrated by the quick timing, which meant our congregations across the country weren't sufficiently engaged in making such a momentous and historic decision. And more than a few felt a mix of all of these feelings. A number of people shared that they felt conflicted, that they are committed to really taking on the work of racial justice, and that they want our decisions made in keeping with our best democratic practices. Needless to say, it's all been messy and complex. We have had to grapple with the fact that our cherished principles can sometimes come into conflict with one another, that we can feel strongly about two things at once, that there can be many truths captured in a single moment in time. By midweek, after reviewing the CUC's bylaws, it had become clear that the parliamentarian, acting in good faith, had unfortunately made a mistake in allowing the vote to proceed. As a result, while the clear will of the delegates was to support the eighth principle, the vote was technically out of order and will need to be revisited at a meeting in late November. While this is frustrating and disappointing for many, it also, in the words of the leaders of the CUC, gives us another chance to get it right. We, like most congregations across the country, will be digging deeper into the meaning of the eighth principle in the coming months as we seek to better understand how it calls us to action. In the meantime, if we are looking for truth, and the larger lessons that it may have to teach, there has been much of it embedded in the events of this past week. The lesson being that truth often takes time, that it involves twists and turns, and often benefits from the gift of second and third chances. On a personal level, as we aspire to grow, to deepen on our own spiritual path, we come to realize these complications may well play out in our own hearts and minds. That our search for what is true can lead us to a place of holding even within ourselves many truths that are in tension with one another, truths hopefully working their way towards understanding. I think this is what the poet Walt Whitman was getting at when he wrote, "Do I contradict myself? Very well, then I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes." Indeed, do we all. In the world of what is called process theology, the name Bernard Loomer, if you will excuse the pun, looms large. Process theology is a movement that believes, as my colleague Rob Hardy's articulates it, that the universe is always growing in size and complexity, and that as the universe grows, so does God, and so must we. Loomer saw the increasing complexity of creation as a glorious blossoming that God was delighted to behold. In his later years, Loomer was a member of the First Unitarian Church of Berkeley in California. As Hardy's tells it, after services on Sundays, he would frequently lead his fellow congregants in deeply theological conversations. After laying out his vision of the complexity of creation, he would often ask the group, "What is the size of your soul?" By which he meant, what is your soul's ability to grow and expand, to stretch when life throws more contradictions your way? Size was the defining concept in Loomer's spirituality. He always wrote the word size, S-I-Z-E, with capital letters and dashes to better convey the spaciousness that he intended by using the word. Loomer described his concept this way. By size, S-I-Z-E, I mean the capacity of a person's soul, the range and depth of their love, their capacity for relationships. I mean the volume of life you can take into your being and still maintain your integrity and individuality, the intensity and variety of outlook you can entertain in the unity of your being without feeling defensive or insecure. I mean the strength of your spirit to encourage others to become freer in the development of their diversity and uniqueness. I mean the power to sustain more complex and enriching tensions. I mean the magnanimity of concern to provide conditions that enable others to increase in stature. I leave you this morning with a story, an object lesson of sorts, a spiritual teaching that invites us to hold such complexity. The monks had been at it for days. They were painstakingly shaping tiny crystals of colored sand, ground from gemstones, into a visually stunning mandala, a spiritual depiction of the cosmos. In his book Callings, Greg Lavoie recounts a visit to this exhibit of sacred art from Tibet, where a group of monks traveling with the Dalai Lama were creating the elaborate mandala. For nearly a month, they had worked silently, bent over the low platform that cradled the growing image. They had lain out their intricate geometry of devotion by hand, surrounded constantly by a circle of onlookers who stood sometimes there for hours simply watching, with their own busy lives uncharacteristically forgotten. As a spectacular lesson on the Buddhist teaching of non-attachment, the monks intended from the very start, as is the Buddhist practice, to dismantle the mandala, to destroy it after a few months on exhibit, and then to scatter its remains in the sea. On the day before the final ritual celebrating its completion, just as the monks were putting the finishing touches on the mandala, a woman jumped over the velvet ropes, climbed onto the platform, and trampled the mandala with her feet, screaming something about Buddhist death cults. When Lavoie, sitting in his kitchen, read about this attack on the mandala that he had just seen being made, he was filled with anger. But his rage turned to absolute disbelief when he read about how these Tibetan monks responded. "We don't feel any negativity," one of them said. "We don't know how to judge her motivations. We are praying for her to know love and compassion." Lavoie confesses that coming from a long line of avengers, people who have demanded eyes for eyes and teeth for teeth, he had always had a difficult time with forgiveness. He had hung on to certain betrayals of his life, refusing to let things go that he had long ago lost forever. Even so, he was completely aghast when he learned that the museum was considering pressing charges against the woman. To do so, he thought, would greatly dishonor the monks' gracious gesture, their demonstration of grace and forgiveness, an act, he said, that greatly diffused the situation, drained much of the bitterness from it, and set a very hard example for the rest of us to follow. More than half a century ago, the Trappist monk Thomas Merton said, "We are living in the greatest revolution in history, a huge, spontaneous upheaval of the entire human race, not a revolution planned and carried out by any particular party, race, or nation, but a deep, elemental boiling over of all the inner contradictions that have ever been, a revelation of the chaotic forces inside everybody. This is not something," he said, "we have chosen, nor is it something we can avoid." Merton's words seem to have become only more true in our own time. Let us then, in our day and in our many ways, embrace our contradictions for the great teachers they can be. Let us find in tension the possibility of greater clarity. Let us grow our souls through holy curiosity to hold the complexity of truth and appreciate the glorious and messy fact that each of us contains multitudes. Blessed be.